clothes, hoping that would smooth it over, but the cold was slapped out of my hand. To be honest, I was a bit confused over the entire thing out of character. Eventually, the scene died down a bit, with the manager or owner coming over to smooth things over. He even offered to comp our rooms for us. How nice. So we accept the offer and headed up to bed for the night. The party wakes up in the morning to a mostly empty inn or tavern, and quickly notices that all of our stuff, minus the clothes that we slept in, is gone. Panicked, we rush to the front, where we find the owner, who tells us not to worry. Each morning, staff comes by to collect our stuff and washes clothes, polishes items, and sharpens blades. After waiting around a bit, the party gets all their items back. Everything missing was returned good as new, and with some temporary bonuses applied. Now, when I say everyone, I mean everyone but Joram. Joram got most of his stuff back, but his sword was mysteriously missing. Looking out the window after rolling some perception checks, the party notices the barmaid from the previous night smashing Joram's heirloom sword on the stone path leading to the back door of the tavern, with chunks flying off the blade, and the sword almost snapped in half. Before the party could stop him, Joram ran out of the tavern to try to stop his sword from being completely destroyed by yelling, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop it!" The barmaid dropped the sword, spun around, and pulled out a dagger. Me. I yelled to the party, "I have a blade raised against me," and lunged at the barmaid. Billy. Are you sure you want to do that? Me. I mean, I've seemingly caught a thief red-handed who not only stole from me, but is actively threatening me with a dagger. I see no reason why I would hold back. Billy. Alrighty, everyone roll initiative. A little bit of a side tangent here. I was both upset as a player and as a character at this point. Although I wasn't particularly attached to playing a fighter with a large sword, I did feel like I was being punished for something that I didn't know I did wrong. I had specifically asked during the first session if Billy wanted me to change my backstory and weapon focus, and he said no to both. If this was some character-specific development based on my backstory, which it wasn't, then I might have understood. But even then, I would have liked to have that kind of conversation prior to the session taking place. Something Billy had mentioned to me in a prior session was that I needed to be careful with the weapon and make sure it didn't break, as no one would be able to fix or craft another for anything shy of 9,000 GP. Losing my sword here would leave me weaponless, with a handful of useless feats, at least for a little bit, and really impact my backstory in a negative way. The idea of that alone didn't feel very good, and left me with a sour taste in my mouth for my own character. Alright, back to the story. Before combat started, I decided to fight using only my fists. I did have a backup weapon, but my plan was to use non-lethal attacks with the assistance of the party. I was hoping that we could resolve the whole thing quickly, and maybe make peace with the barmaid after everything was resolved. I mentioned my intentions to the party, and Malk runs up and lets a punch fly, dealing some non-lethal damage. The barmaid takes a swing at me with a dagger and misses, and I deal a non-lethal hit. Bard sings a song, and then Sorcerer takes her turn. Sorcerer. I cast Glue Seal on Joram. Me. What? Why? Sorcerer. Because I can tell he's really upset, and there must be a way to solve this without violence. Me. She drew a knife on me. Sorcerer. Well, you did charge at her out of nowhere in a threatening manner. Billy. Alright, roll a reflex. I fail, and fail the subsequent check to break free from being glued to the floor in place. Billy decides combat is over by having the ragtag team of watchmen come over to investigate the issue. They place me, and only me, under arrest, while they get everyone else's statements. Most of the party tells the same story about the events of the previous night and the current situation, except for Sorcerer, who adds in that I, suddenly and for no reason, rushed the poor girl. One of the watchmen grabbed my now beat-up sword from the ground and hold it in front of me. Is this what all the fuss was about? He then snaps it in half by beating it against the wall. I get hauled away, waiting to be judged for my crimes at the nearest town. The game ends, and I, along with most of the other players, are a bit quiet. Billy picks up on how upset I am, and asks to speak to me outside. I follow, bringing Malk with me. We talked for a bit about the whole situation, and I expressed my displeasure with some of the in-game events and being singled out randomly. Billy explained that he was really not purposely trying to target me in or out of game, and admits that the big sword and the other unrealistic, not sure what he meant by this, features of my character really did bother him after all. He adds on that he might have expressed it on a whim, in-game, and in a very bad way, so he apologized for the treatment out of game, and asked if I would stay as a player. Ultimately, I told him that I would give it another shot, mostly because I had become friends with everyone at the table, including Sorcerer and Billy himself. We were all pretty much the only employees at our company in the same 20-something-year-old range group, and these weekly sessions were a great way to get out of the house to meet up. I asked Billy if I could just roll up a new character, since I felt this one was pretty much done with. He said sure, and we went back inside. And so yeah, that is the anticlimactic end of my adventures with the mighty swordsman Joram. He got sent to the fantasy Alcatraz, and I think was eventually murdered in a prison riot. I do feel bad that his clan is without a leader, but that little plot thread never came up again. Though, spoiler, only one person's backstory was actually explored in-game during the time I played with the group, and I'll leave it open for whose it was. I think I'll write one more post about this campaign, and the various horrors that occurred after my new character, Ragu, the Ranger, joined the party. Yeah, I'd have to say that OP was definitely being singled out there. Hell, the DM basically admitted so by stating that OP's build bothered him, even though it was approved beforehand. Though at least it sounds like they talked it out like adults, which is why communication is a cornerstone in any tabletop RPG like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. Though, by the sounds of things only get worse from here on out, and I think I can guess whose backstory became the focus of this game. But before we find out, I think we all need a kitty intermission. Saga, Part 3. So this is the third, and probably last, part to my horror story that took place in 2016. This will also probably be the longest part, seeing as it covers everything that happened until the campaign dissolved. I apologize for the length in advance, and there will be a TLDR at the bottom. To address the main comment I saw in my last two posts about why I didn't just leave the game, it's complicated. Part of it was probably due to not having the biggest backbone, like some pointed out. We were all coworkers, so I didn't want the stigma of leaving a game hanging over my head at work. I thought of everyone at the table as good friends, and had never left the gaming table due to negative reasons. Finally, I didn't have a good gauge on what my tolerance for BS between friends should be. All of these reasons were the excuses that I made to myself. It's something that I had to learn the hard way, and I'm glad I did. I will not be making the same mistakes again. When we left off, Billy had apologized to me for the in-game actions that he took against my character, and asked if I would stay in the game, along with the promise that he wouldn't do something like that again. To be completely fair to him, the game went great for a while after that incident. I rolled up a ranger named Ragu, and there were no further issues with targeting or being harassed by NPCs like my fighter had experienced. Looking back on it, I do remember that Billy had made another comment about me playing another male character, but it wasn't enough to trigger my radar like it had that first time. I came into the game as a level 3, same as my fighter with the same EXP, and we had 6 to 7 months of really good sessions where nothing really bad happened. The game itself was going really smoothly, and there were some things that I genuinely liked about it. First, the rules Billy had at the table. While you could bluff the other player characters or attempt to steal items from them, the one thing you could never do is influence their decisions. As an example, if a player tried to convince you to follow a specific plan and rolled a perfect diplomacy check against you, you always had the agency to disagree no matter what your opposed roll was. The most that would happen is that your player character would think the plan described to you was really good. I'm not sure if this is a rules as written or something Billy just had as a rule, but I liked it. The plot was pretty good, if not a little generic, and the metagaming previously shown by Sorcerer seemed to pretty much stop after Monk had complained to Billy. There were a few issues early on, however. Although not a horror by itself, something that always seemed to happen is when the party visited a new town, Sorcerer would get some magic item that had previously belonged to her grandmother, Billy's wife's character from a different campaign. We would walk in, and somehow, an NPC would recognize and greet Sorcerer, spouting praises to the great Sorcerer who once saved the day. They would take Sorcerer to a vault, chest, shop, bank, etc., and hand her the item. Now, these items were good, like really good in some cases, but it didn't bother me too much. If Billy wanted to give his wife something to make her feel good and keep her power up, fine. The main issue with this is that the rest of the party were severely under-equipped. The first real signs of trouble came when the party was at level 10. At the start of one of our sessions, Billy introduced a new player, who we will call Nathan. Nathan was one of Billy's high school friends who had just graduated from college and had moved back home. Nathan was looking to join a game, so Billy invited him to ours. Once introductions were made, Nathan introduces his character, a Cavalier. Now, there were three main problems with Nathan and his Cavalier. First, up until now, we had only been allowed to use the core rulebook for everything, with no exceptions. Billy explained that because the new players were now used to Pathfinder, he was opening up the game to include every book for people rolling new characters. He also told us that we could start taking feats, spells, and equipment from the other books when leveling up. While this was a little annoying, as we had already committed 10 levels worth of progress to core stuff only, overall, the table was glad to have access to more things. Yeah, I can see how that could be a little annoying and unfair to the other players, considering that they could have made completely different builds from the start, but Nathan was able to have access to all of it to build up his level 10 character. As a side note, before talking about the second issue, Nathan is now a really good friend of mine. He's got a good sense of humor and is really respectful to people's boundaries. As an example, at the end of one of our sessions, he asked me out on some sort of lunch or dinner date, which I rejected. He didn't try to pursue it any further, and we continued in and out of game as if nothing had happened. All that being said, the second issue was that playing with Nathan and his Cavalier was awful. Not only did he bring in one of the more mid-max creations I've ever seen, but most roleplay encounters would turn into combats if his character was ever involved, and Nathan loved making himself involved. An example of this was when the party came across a traveling band, being led by a lute-playing bard. Ragu started asking the bard about what cities they had traveled to and what type of music they liked playing. Then, all of a sudden, from the top of the hill, Nathan charged and ran his lance through one of the band members, initiating combat. When asked why he felt the need to murder a non-hostile group of musicians, Nathan responded with a shrug and said something along the lines of, "My backstory is that I hate music," or something. Well, that is a really stupid reason to kill a band that had done nothing wrong. I mean, I don't like the mailman, but it's not like you see me running out and trying to fireball him. And besides, who doesn't like music? Finally, the third and biggest issue that started to become much more noticeable was our player character's wealth. When Nathan built his character, he got to buy nearly 70k worth of magic and non-magic items per the wealth by level table. Aside from Sorcerer and him, the rest of the party maxed out at around 6 to 7k worth of items and gold. Billy was notoriously stingy with loot. Apart from the cave we found when we were level 2, we never found another chest or got a drop from an enemy that wasn't a 30 GP used weapon. Billy's reasoning for this was that he wanted us to make use of our surroundings and exploit natural resources around us, instead of relying on manufactured goods. He also said that if we did get magic items, they would feel much more special. To be fair, this is an interesting idea in theory, but in practice, it just wasn't consistent enough to get us close to where we should have been power-wise. On top of that, Billy used generation tables to determine what item shops he had available. This was annoying, to say the least. More often than not, finding a specific potion or magic item while shopping was literally impossible. If we did find something we wanted from a shop, it would cost 3 to 4 times more due to it not being manufactured in the region. If we did decide to buy the item at the marked up cost anyway, we would have to roll a diplomacy check to see if the shopkeeper was going to try to screw us over even more by increasing the price at the last second. Ragu might be the first character in Pathfinder's history to pay over 2,000 gold for a potion of enlarged person. Of course, he never got to use the potion due to Nathan stealing it out of his backpack at night after acquiring it. Combats were no longer fun for the majority of the party. At first, Nathan or Sorcerer would end combats very quickly due to being significantly more powerful than the rest of the party. Although the rest of the party felt somewhat outclassed, we didn't see it as much of an issue, as we could still contribute something to the fights. Billy didn't think the same way as us, and instead opted to balance combat encounters around Nathan and Sorcerer. This made combat impossible for the rest of us. It even got to the point where when combat would start, we would pray that the enemies wouldn't target us during the first round, so that we could run to cover and stay there the whole fight. If we were targeted, 90% of the time, we would be knocked out. Monk and Bard fared slightly better than me, but still had their own issues with the combat. After one of our sessions ended, Bard addressed the table and mentioned that he would like to bring another character to the next session. Billy said that it was fine, and asked Monk if he would like to change characters as well, since it seemed like he wasn't having as much fun as normal. Monk said that he would like to, and mentioned that he was itching to try out a war priest. So I asked if it was alright if I swapped characters too, to something built using more than just core, and Billy, flatly and somewhat angrily, refused. Monk spoke up before I could, and asked, why is she the only one not allowed to change characters? To which Billy snapped back, because she already changed characters once. Billy, Monk, and Bard argued back and forth a little before I asked if it would be alright to change characters as well, since it seemed like he wasn't having as much fun as normal. Monk said that he would like to, and mentioned that he was itching to try out a war priest. So I asked if it was alright if I swapped characters too, to something built using more than just core, and Billy, flatly and somewhat angrily, refused. Monk spoke up before I could, and asked, why is she the only one not allowed to change characters? To which Billy snapped back, because she already changed characters once. Billy, Monk, and Bard argued back and forth a little before I asked if it would be alright if I just changed my class instead. Then Billy grumbled in agreement and said, yes, that would be fine, but you have to keep your abilities, skills, and feats as close to what you currently have as possible. The following week, over our work chat, I discussed with Billy what class I would change into, and what stuff I would be allowed to swap around to make it work. I settled on an alchemist. In order to keep with Billy's request, I swapped out the feats that I took from leveling up to the bow feats I got as a ranger. The only big change I had to make was swapping my wisdom and intelligence